So the first example that I wanted to talk about, and I've seen this in many, many organizations, is what I'm calling just say no. And this is when a business analysis professional politely rejects a customer request. We do this by analyzing a request to see what the business benefit would be, by estimating the cost of the change for whatever the customer is requesting, and then making a recommendation, having a conversation with our customers, sometimes about why maybe their request doesn't make really good business sense. We know, and I have worked a lot with IT groups and business analysts working in IT, we get an amazing number of requests from customers, whether they're external customers or internal employees, that come to the IT department to make changes to IT systems. And most organizations tend to be hesitant to say no when these requests come in. And so they keep coming and they keep coming, and you see many companies with huge backlogs with all of these requests for changes. But when you really look at some of these requests, and business analysts are very good at this, and spend a little bit of time studying it, what you often see is maybe this isn't such a great idea, or maybe there's a different way that we can do this that would be more beneficial for the organization. And that's really what BAs do. And I wanted to show you a specific example, and it's kind of funny because I actually ran into this very similar example in a couple different companies. What seems like a really simple change. A user asked to change a screen entry field to a drop-down box. In this particular scenario, when customers call into their company to cancel their service, they capture a reason for the cancellation. And somebody had the idea, well, wouldn't it be great, instead of having our customer service people type a free-form text reason in here, that we add a drop-down box and we give them some options. Most of the time, maybe people are leaving because they're moving to a different state, we don't provide service there, or they're changing to a lower cost provider, or they lost their job. This seems like a really simple change, and most of the time if you talk to an IT person, they would immediately say, oh yeah, that's easy, I can do that, and they would start coding. What an analyst does here, though, is to first ask, why? Why do we want to make this change? What is this going to do for us? And the user might say, well, we'll be able to have more consistent reporting on what these reasons for cancellation are. Okay, great. And a BA would also ask, well, what do we want in those drop-down boxes? What are the reasons that you would get for cancellation? That's all great, but invariably what happens is the dreaded other at the end of this list. So as many typical cancellation reasons as we come up with, there's always going to be some odd ones. So we want, the requester will say, well, I want to be able to capture those other things. And if we select other, then we want the customer service rep to type that in. Now I have another free-form text box, right? And that means that the underlying database has to have a new field. And you immediately, when you start to analyze this and think about the requirements, you now have a screen change. You have a database change. You have database conversion if you have to go back to all the prior cancellations and convert them into this new data structure. You have report changes. So suddenly this thing that looked like a very simple small change becomes larger and larger. And this is where a business analyst professional will ask more questions before we start working to say, is this really a good idea? Is this really necessary? And one of the customers that I actually ran into this in, I asked them, I said, do you know the main reason why your customers typically cancel? And they said, oh yeah, and they were able to tell me right away, yeah, it's moving to a new state. Well then, why do you need the ability to do all this analysis if you kind of already know the answer, right? But it seemed like a good idea, right? And so what I say is that in our organizations where we typically don't have time to do all the things that we feel like we need to do to move forward, a business analysis professional spending, in this example, maybe a week of time, maybe less than a week, a couple $1,000s of their time to analyze this and think through actually all the changes that would be required, could actually save the company a lot of money. One of the organizations I worked with, their average IT change was about a $40,000 cost. If you consider that it went through prioritization, the requester's time to ask for the ticket. It had to go through analysis. It had to go through design and architecture. It had to go through coding. It had to go through testing. It had to go through UAT. All that time has possibly been wasted. And if the BA upfront could simply have said, hey, this probably isn't really necessary, this isn't really going to bring us a lot of value, we could save $31,000 or maybe more, depending on your cost, on an average change in IT. And if you, as a BA, can find 3 or 4 of those in a year, you've already paid for your own salary. If you find 3 or 4 in a month, you could justify hiring 3 more BAs.